Get up and move to economy right now. How could someone like you possibly sit here?
You do not belong in first class. The words cut through the cabin before the aircraft door had even closed. Every head turned. A champagne glass stopped halfway to a woman's lips. A businessman froze with one hand on his laptop. Somewhere near the galley, the soft chime of the boarding system sounded too bright, too normal, as if the plane itself had not just become a courtroom. Lauren Whitaker sat in seat 2A. She did not flinch. Her left hand rested on the leather armrest. Her right hand held a slim tablet with a document still open on the screen. She wore a navy blazer, charcoal slacks, and low black heels. Nothing loud, nothing flashy, the kind of elegance that did not ask for permission. But Heather Collins stood over her like permission was exactly what Lauren needed. Heather was 36, neat, polished, and rigid, in the way some people became when they confused authority with importance. Her blonde hair was pinned into a perfect twist. Her uniform looked freshly pressed. Her smile was not a smile at all. It was a line drawn across her face. "Mom," Heather said, louder this time, "I need you to gather your belongings and move to the back of the aircraft." Lauren looked up slowly. The cabin lights caught her eyes. Calm, dark, steady. "For what reason?" she asked. Her voice was soft, but it carried. Heather blinked once, surprised by the lack of panic. She had expected embarrassment, maybe confusion, maybe an apology. She had expected Lauren to shrink under the weight of everyone watching. Lauren did not shrink. Heather lifted her tablet, glanced at it, then looked back at Lauren without really checking anything. "This cabin is reserved for first-class passengers." A small sound moved through the row behind him. Not quite a laugh, not quite a cough. Ryan Parker, seated in 1C, lowered his newspaper and reached for his phone. He was 47, silver at the temples, expensive watch turned outward, just enough for people to notice. He had the alert expression of a man who loved being close to other people's trouble. Across the aisle, Eleanor Bennett leaned toward her husband, her pearl earrings catching the light. "I knew something looked off," she whispered. She did not whisper quietly enough. Lauren heard her. So did Heather. Heather's chin lifted, encouraged. Lauren reached into the side pocket of her leather tote and pulled out her boarding pass. She held it up between two fingers, clean and flat. "My seat is 2A, she said. "This is my boarding pass." Heather snatched it before Lauren finished speaking. Not took it, snatched it. The sound of paper against fingers was small, but in that silence it felt sharp. Heather held the pass close to her face. Her eyes moved over the printed letters, but her expression did not change. That was the first thing Mia Torres noticed from row 3. Mia was 29, traveling home to Denver after visiting her mother in Atlanta. She had worked in customer service long enough to know the difference between checking and searching for a reason not to believe someone. Heather was not checking. She was deciding. "This doesn't look right," Heather said. Lauren's expression remained still. "What part?" Heather's lips tightened. Ryan's phone came up now, low at first, casual, then higher. "Here we go," he murmured, already recording. Heather turned slightly, making sure the cabin could hear her. "We have had issues with passengers trying to sit in premium cabins without proper authorization." Lauren looked at the boarding pass in Heather's hand. "Proper authorization is the ticket." "And I am telling you," Heather snapped, "that something about this situation is not adding up." A strange thing happened then. The cabin began to choose sides without anyone asking. Not with speeches, not openly, with glances, with silence. With the way some passengers looked away because the scene made them uncomfortable, but not uncomfortable enough to help. With the way others watched Lauren, as if her calmness was proof of guilt instead of dignity. Heather stepped closer. The aisle was narrow. Her shadow crossed Lauren's knees. "Mom, I am going to give you one chance to make this easy. Stand up, take your bag, and we will reseat you where you belong." Lauren's fingers curled once around the armrest. Only once. It was the only sign that the words had landed, "where you belong." She had heard that phrase before, dressed in different clothes, at hotel desks, in boardrooms, at private clubs, in restaurants where the waiter handed the check to the man beside her. People rarely said the whole thing out loud. They rarely had to. Lauren inhaled slowly. She thought of her father, who had cleaned airport terminals for 28 years and still told her to look people in the eye. She thought of her mother, who used to press her Sunday dress before school board meetings and say, "Never let small people to teach you to feel small." Lauren placed her tablet face down on her lap. "I am not moving," she said. The words were quiet, final. Heather's face hardened. Eleanor Bennett gave a soft, offended gasp, as if Lauren's refusal had injured her personally. Ryan leaned into the aisle, camera steady now. "First-class drama," he whispered into his phone. "Woman refuses to leave seat. Flight attendant trying to handle it." Mia's eyes shifted from Ryan to Lauren. Something about this was wrong. Not loud wrong. Worse. Familiar wrong. Heather tapped the headset clip near her collar. Her voice changed. It became official. Performative. "Gate security, this is forward cabin. I need assistance on board. We have a non-compliant passenger refusing to vacate a first-class seat." Lauren did not speak. She reached for her phone, turned the screen away from the aisle, and typed a message with her thumb. 3 words, "Start documenting now." Then she placed the phone beside her tablet. Heather noticed. "Oh," she said with a short laugh. "Calling someone now?" Lauren looked up at her. "No," she said, creating a record. For the first time, Heather hesitated. Just a breath. Just long enough for the air in the cabin to change. Because Lauren's tone did not sound like fear. It sounded like a woman who understood exactly how power worked and how quickly it could move. The words did not land the way Heather expected. Creating a record, it was calm, too calm. For a moment, the first-class cabin seemed to lean toward Lauren Whitaker without moving. The overhead lights hummed. A luggage bin clicked shut somewhere behind them. Outside the oval windows, the last orange strip of afternoon sun burned across the runway. Heather stared at Lauren's phone, then at Lauren's face. "You are not recording me," Heather said. Lauren did not touch the phone again. "I did not say I was." "Then what does that mean?" "It means I'm making sure every step of this is documented." Ryan Parker shifted in his seat, still filming. His eyes lit up. He liked that line. It sounded important. It sounded like trouble. He tilted the phone higher, hoping his viewers could hear. Heather saw the camera and made the worst possible choice. She straightened her shoulders. She performed. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the delay," she said, turning halfway toward the cabin. "We are dealing with a passenger who refuses to cooperate with standard seating verification." A few people looked down. A few looked away. Eleanor Bennett did neither. She leaned into the aisle, her voice thin and certain. "Some people think rules are optional now." Her husband touched her sleeve. "Ellie."
"What?"
she whispered back, but not softly. "Everyone is thinking it." Lauren heard that too. She kept her eyes on Heather. In row 3, Mia Torres slowly lowered the magazine she had been pretending to read. Her stomach tightened. She had seen this kind of scene before, not in first class, but in grocery stores, at hotel desks, at apartment leasing offices. Someone in a uniform. Someone calm being treated like a threat. Everyone else pretending not to understand what was happening. She looked at Lauren's boarding pass, still in Heather's hand. Mia's fingers moved toward her own phone, then stopped. She did not want to be another person filming someone's humiliation, but she also knew silence could become a kind of permission. "Mom," Mia said. Her voice was not loud, but it cut through the tight air. Heather turned sharply. "Please remain seated." "I am seated," Mia said. "I just think you should check the ticket properly." Heather's eyes narrowed. "I am handling this," said, surprising herself. "You're accusing her." The cabin shifted again. Ryan's phone moved toward Mia now. His eyebrows rose, better content. Heather took one step into the aisle, close enough for the passengers around her to smell the sharp perfume at her collar. "I will not debate cabin procedure with another passenger." Lauren looked at Mia for the first time, just a glance. A quiet thank you. Mia felt it in her chest. Heather turned back to Lauren. "Last chance. Stand up." Lauren's breath moved in slowly, out slowly. No, one word, no anger, no tremble. Heather's jaw tightened so hard a muscle jumped near her cheek. She lifted the boarding pass and flicked it against Lauren's tablet. The pass slid into Lauren's lap. A small, ugly sound. Paper against glass. Several passengers flinched. Caleb Morgan, seated across the aisle in 4C, had been quiet until then. He was 54, broad-shouldered, wearing a worn brown jacket that looked more practical than expensive. He had the tired eyes of a man who had learned to measure rooms before entering them. Now he sat forward. "Excuse me," he said. Heather did not turn. "Sir, this does not concern you. It concerns everybody if you're trying to remove a woman from a seat she paid for." Heather spun toward him. "You need to sit back and stay out of this." "I am sitting back," Caleb said. His voice stayed level, and I saw her boarding pass when she came in. It said 2A. Eleanor made a dismissive sound. "Maybe you misread it." Caleb turned his head slowly. "I know how to treat a seat number, Mom." The words were simple, polite. They stung anyway. Ryan whispered into his phone. Now another passenger is getting involved. Heather tapped her headset again, harder this time. "Security, where are you?" A voice crackled faintly in her earpiece. Lauren watched Heather listen. She watched the fear begin to creep under the anger. Not fear of Lauren, not yet. Fear of losing control in front of an audience. That, Lauren understood, was when people became dangerous. Heather lowered her hand. "Security is on the jet bridge," she announced. "We will resolve this now." The word resolve sounded almost kind, but everyone knew what she meant. Mia swallowed. Caleb leaned back, but his eyes stayed on Lauren. Ryan kept recording. Eleanor folded her hands over her purse, satisfied, as if justice had already arrived. Then came the footsteps. Heavy, measured, official. The sound moved from the jet bridge into the aircraft like a drumbeat. 2 airport security officers stepped through the front door. The first was Officer Mark Reynolds, 42, clean-shaven, calm, in the way trained people try to look calm when everyone is staring. Behind him stood a younger officer, quiet, watching the aisle. Officer Reynolds looked first at Heather. That was the second mistake, not because humans emit harm, because habit is powerful. Uniform looked to uniform. Authority looked to authority. The person seated became the problem before anyone asked a question. "What's going on?" Reynolds asked. Heather exhaled sharply, as if she had been holding the whole plane together alone. "This passenger is refusing to leave a first-class seat that does not appear to be hers," she said. "She has been confrontational and is delaying departure." Lauren's eyes lifted. "Officer," she said, "that is not accurate." Heather spoke over her. She was asked multiple times to cooperate. Lauren turned her head toward Reynolds. "My boarding pass says 2A. She took it from me, refused to verify it properly, and accused me in front of the cabin." Reynolds looked at the boarding pass in Lauren's lap. For 1 second, doubt touched his face. Then training pulled him back to the easiest path. "Mom," he said, "why don't you step off the aircraft with us and we can sort this out at the gate?" The cabin went still. Lauren did not blink. "Why would I leave my assigned seat to prove I belong in it?" Reynolds paused. It was a fair question. Everyone knew it. Even Heather knew it. But the moment had momentum now, and momentum can carry decent people into shameful choices. "Mom," Reynolds said carefully, "this will be faster." "For whom?" Lauren asked. No one answered. The question hung in the cabin, heavier than the recycled air, heavier than the watching phones, heavier than Heather's forced authority. Lauren picked up her boarding pass and held it toward Reynolds. "Verify it here." Reynolds reached for it. Heather's hand moved first. "Officer, we have a departure schedule." Lauren's voice cut in. "So do I." The cabin fell silent again. This time, it was different. Not because Lauren was louder, because her calm was starting to sound less like patience and more like power. Officer Reynolds reached for the boarding pass, and for one brief second, the cabin seemed to breathe again. It was a small movement, a hand extending, a document being accepted, a chance for common sense to return. But Heather stepped into that space like she could physically block the truth. "Officer, with respect," she said, her voice tight, "we do not have time to let every passenger argue procedure. She has already refused multiple instructions." Lauren kept her arm extended. The boarding pass did not shake. Reynolds looked from Heather to Lauren. He was trained to de-escalate. He was also trained to respect flight crew judgment. Those two instincts now pulled against each other, and everyone in the cabin could see it in his face. His younger partner, Officer Daniel Price, glanced toward the pass. "Mark," he said quietly, "we should probably check it." Heather turned on him. "It has been checked." "No," Mia said from row 3. "It was looked at. That is not the same thing." A low murmur moved through the cabin, not loud, not brave, but real. Ryan Parker shifted again, his phone still up, though his expression had changed. He had started recording because he wanted a scene. Now the scene was becoming something else, something with edges, something that might not make him look as good as he thought. Eleanor Bennett heard the murmur and sat straighter, offended by the possibility that the room might stop agreeing with her. "Oh, for heaven's sake," she said. "Just remove her and sort it out later. Some of us have connections." Caleb Morgan turned his head, and some people have dignity. Eleanor's mouth opened, then closed. That word did something to the cabin, dignity. It reached places policy could not. Lauren's eyes softened for half a second. Not because she needed rescue, she did not, but because a stranger had named what was being taken from her. Reynolds finally took the boarding pass. He studied it. Seat 2A, first class, Lauren Whitaker. He looked at the gate barcode, the flight number, the date. Everything appeared normal. He held it toward Heather. "Do you have the manifest?" Heather lifted her tablet. Her fingers moved too fast. Tap, swipe, tap again. Then she paused. It was small, but Lauren saw it. So did Mia. Heather's eyes tightened. She tapped again, harder this time, as if pressure could change the screen. "What does it say?" Lauren asked. Heather did not answer. Reynolds looked over her shoulder. "It says 2A. Heather's throat moved. "The system may not be refreshed." Daniel Price leaned in. "It is live boarding data." Heather snapped her eyes toward him. "I know what it is." There it was, the crack. Not in the system, in the story. Ryan lowered his phone an inch. His live chat was moving fast now. He could not read every comment, but he caught enough. "Check the ticket. She has proof. This looks bad." "Why is the attendant so angry?" Ryan swallowed. He had been whispering judgment into the internet minutes ago. Now the internet was turning its gaze back toward him. Lauren took her boarding pass from Reynolds when he offered it back. "Thank you," she said. The words were polite. That made them sharper. Heather's face colored. "This still does not explain her behavior."
"What behavior?"
Caleb asked. Heather pointed toward Lauren, her refusal to cooperate. Lauren looked at Reynolds. "I cooperated by showing my boarding pass. I answered questions. I remained seated. I did not raise my voice. I did not insult anyone." Her eyes moved to Heather. "I was insulted." The silence that followed was different from the earlier silence. Earlier, people had been waiting for Lauren to be removed. Now they were waiting for Heather to explain herself. Heather felt it, the shift, the loss of the room. And because she felt it, she reached for the one thing people often reach for when fairness begins to expose them. Procedure. "Captain needs to be informed," she said. "I am not comfortable serving a passenger who is hostile to crew." Lauren's eyebrows lifted slightly. Hostile. The word landed like a stain. Mia let out a soft breath. "She has not been hostile." Heather spun toward her again. "Mom, this is your final warning. Do not interfere." Mia's hands tightened around the armrests. She was not naturally confrontational. Her heart was beating hard enough that she could feel it in her neck. But she thought of her mother, a retired nurse who used to come home exhausted from double shifts and still be spoken to like she was invisible. Mia sat forward. "I am not interfering," she said. "I am witnessing." Lauren looked down for a moment. That word mattered too. Witnessing, not watching. There was a difference. Officer Reynolds rubbed a hand over the back of his neck. "Miss Collins, if the boarding pass is valid, what is the current safety concern?" Heather's mouth parted. She had expected him to keep moving forward. She had expected the uniform to stand beside the uniform. She had not prepared for the possibility of a simple question. "She has created tension in the cabin," Heather said. Caleb gave a short laugh, not amused. "You created tension in the cabin." Ryan's phone came up again, not eagerly this time, more carefully. He wanted the protection of recording now, the way people hide behind glass when they realize the fire is spreading. From the front galley, a man in a dark airline jacket appeared. Brian Foster. 45, flight operations manager. He had the measured walk of someone used to walking into problems and making them disappear. Not solving them, disappearing them. His eyes moved quickly. Heather, security, Lauren, passengers, phones. "Too many phones. What is causing the delay?" Brian asked. Heather moved toward him like a drowning person reaching for shore. "Brian, thank God." Passenger in 2A refused to comply with a seat verification request and escalated the situation. Lauren spoke before Brian could accept the frame. "That is false." Brian turned toward her. His expression stayed professional, but his eyes sharpened. He was not used to being interrupted by the person at the center of a complaint. "Mom, I will speak with you in a moment." "You are speaking with me now," Lauren said. It was not rude. It was exact. Brian paused. The cabin felt it again, that calm pressure. He looked at Officer Reynolds. "Has the passenger been verified?" Reynolds nodded. "Her boarding pass matches 2A. Brian's jaw tightened just enough to show irritation. "Not at Heather." "Not yet, at the complication." "Ms. Whitaker," Brian said, reading the name from the pass, "we apologize for any confusion. But given the disruption, it may be best for everyone if we reseat you temporarily while we review this." Lauren stared at him. The cabin went colder. Heather almost smiled. Almost. Lauren set the boarding pass on her tray table perfectly straight. "Best for everyone," she repeated. Brian softened his voice. "We are trying to keep the flight on schedule." "No," Lauren said. "You are trying to make the person who was mistreated carry the cost of the mistreatment." The words moved through the cabin slowly. They did not shout, they settled. Brian looked away first. That was the moment Lauren knew he understood. Maybe not fully, maybe not morally, but professionally, legally, operationally, he understood that the problem was no longer seated in 2A. The problem was standing around her. Heather's headset crackled. A voice from the cockpit came through faintly. "Forward cabin, status?" Brian looked toward the closed cockpit door. "Captain Walker wants an update," he said. Lauren picked up her phone and glanced at the screen. One new message. "Legal is standing by." Another. "Corporate contracts notified." A third. "Board liaison available." She placed the phone face down again. Heather saw the movement. Her eyes flickered with contempt, but beneath it now, something else had begun to grow. Concern. Brian noticed too. "Ms. Whitaker," he said carefully, "is there someone you need us to contact?" Lauren looked at him. For the first time since the confrontation began, she allowed a trace of disappointment to show. Not anger, disappointment. The kind that made grown people feel smaller. "You had someone to contact from the beginning," she said. "Your own system." Brian said nothing. Behind him, the cockpit door opened. Captain James Walker stepped out. 58, tall, silver hair, face set in the practiced calm of a man who had carried thousands of lives through storms, mechanical issues, and angry passengers. But this was not weather. This was human failure, and human failure, when ignored, could bring down more than a flight. Captain Walker looked at Lauren, then at the boarding pass, then at the phones, then at Heather. "What exactly happened here?" he asked. No one answered right away, because now, finally, the question sounded dangerous. Captain Walker stood in the aisle and waited. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The 4 gold stripes on his sleeves did enough speaking for him. Heather was the first to move. She stepped closer to him, lowering her voice just enough to sound private, but not enough to stop the first 2 rows from hearing every word. "Captain, this passenger became argumentative during seat verification. She refused my instructions, challenged crew authority, and created a disruption in the first-class cabin." Lauren watched Heather's mouth shape each word. Argumentative, refused, authority, disruption. Words like that had weight in an aircraft. They could turn a paying customer into a security risk. They could make people stop asking what happened and start asking how fast the problem could be removed. Captain Walker looked at Lauren. "Ms. Whitaker," he said, "is that your understanding of events?" Heather's eyes flashed. "Captain, with respect, crew statements should be enough here." Walker did not look away from Lauren. "I asked Ms. Whitaker." The cabin felt that. So did Heather. Lauren sat straight, both hands visible on the armrests. She knew what people saw. A black woman in a first-class seat, a flight crew standing over her, phones raised, security nearby. The scene already had a shape, and shapes were hard to change once people believed them. Still, she spoke slowly. "I boarded with a valid first-class ticket, seat 2A. Miss Collins questioned whether I belong here. I showed my boarding pass. She took it from me, accused me in front of the cabin, and called security before verifying the ticket through your own system." Her voice did not shake. "She also asked me to leave my assigned seat after the ticket was confirmed." Captain Walker's jaw tightened. Brian Foster looked down at the floor. Officer Reynolds folded his hands in front of him and stayed quiet. His earlier certainty had drained away, leaving something heavier behind. Heather gave a sharp laugh. That is a very selective version. Mia Torres leaned forward before fear could stop her. It is what happened, she said. Heather turned on her. Mom, I told you not to interfere. Mia's face was pale now, but her voice held. I am not interfering. I am telling the truth. Caleb Morgan nodded once. Same here. The lady showed her ticket more than once. Ryan Parker lowered his phone to his lap, then raised it again. His hand was less steady now. He understood something ugly about himself in that moment. He had become part of the pressure. He had not slapped anyone. He had not shouted. But he had helped make Lauren smaller by turning her into a spectacle. Eleanor Bennett shifted in her seat. Well, none of us know what happened before we noticed. Lauren looked at her. Mrs. Bennett, she said. Eleanor froze. She had not introduced herself. Lauren continued, calm and exact. You said I looked off. You said some people think rules are optional. You said I should be removed and sorted out later. Eleanor's lips parted. I was only concerned about the delay. No, Lauren said. You were comfortable with my removal before you were interested in the facts. The words landed with no cruelty. That made them worse. Eleanor looked down at her purse. Captain Walker turned to Heather. Did you verify the passenger manifest before calling security? Heather swallowed. I attempted to. That is not what I asked. Her face tightened. I checked the boarding pass. And did the boarding pass indicate seat 2A? Heather did not answer quickly enough. Walker's voice dropped. Miss Collins.
Yes,
She said. It appeared to. A small sound moved through the cabin. Not shock. Recognition. People heard the truth trying to crawl out from under the official version. Brian Foster stepped in, palms open, trying to smooth the air. Captain, we can address process concerns later. Right now, we need to get the flight out. We can offer Miss Whitaker compensation, document the incident, and move forward. Lauren looked at him. Compensation for what? Brian stopped. Lauren tilted her head. If nothing wrong happened, why are you offering compensation? No one moved. That was the problem with calm questions. They gave people nowhere to hide. Captain Walker looked at Brian. Call operations. Tell them departure is paused, pending review of a passenger complaint. Heather's head snapped toward him. Captain. He raised one hand. Not another word. It was not loud. It ended the argument. For the first time since the confrontation began, Heather stepped back. The cabin lights flickered once as ground power shifted. Somewhere outside, a baggage cart beeped in reverse. The ordinary sounds of airport life continued, indifferent to the moral weight pressing down inside the aircraft. Lauren's phone buzzed again. She did not rush to check it. She let it sit there a moment, a small black rectangle on a tray table. Quiet, waiting. Captain Walker noticed. So did Brian. Ms. Whitaker, Walker said, more carefully now. May I ask whether you have already contacted someone regarding this incident? Lauren looked up at him. Yes. Heather gave a bitter little smile. Of course she has. Lauren turned her eyes to Heather. You made that necessary. The sentence was soft enough to be almost private. But Heather heard it like a door closing. Brian took one step closer. Who did you contact? Lauren did not answer right away. She picked up her phone and read the newest message. Confirmed. Aircraft lease file active. Executive office alerted. Her thumb hovered over the screen. For years, Lauren had learned to choose the moment. Not because she enjoyed power. She did not. Power to her had always been responsibility with sharper edges. She had built Whitaker Aviation Group after watching her father come home from night shifts with swollen hands and still speak kindly to passengers who never saw him. She had built it because she believed aviation was supposed to move people, not rank their humanity. And now here she was, in a seat she had paid for, on a plane her company helped keep in the sky, being asked to prove she belonged. She locked the phone and placed it down. I contacted my assistant, Lauren said, my legal team, and my corporate contracts office. Brian's expression changed, just slightly. Captain Walker saw it. What corporate contracts office? Walker asked. Lauren picked up her leather tote, slowly. No sudden movements, no drama. She opened the front pocket and removed a slim black card holder. Heather scoffed under her breath. Here we go. Lauren heard her but did not look at her. She opened the holder and removed one card, matte black, white lettering, simple, no logo beyond a small silver wing mark in the corner. She placed it on the tray table, not handed it, placed it, as if the table itself had become evidence. Captain Walker looked down. His eyes moved across the card. Then they stopped. The air seemed to leave his chest. Brian leaned closer. His color changed first, then his posture. Heather looked between them confused. What? Captain Walker picked up the card. His voice was different when he spoke, lower, careful. Lauren Whitaker, he read. Founder and Chief Executive Officer, Whitaker Aviation Group. The cabin went quiet in a new way, not curious, afraid. Ryan's phone slipped slightly in his hand. Mia's eyes widened. Caleb looked at Lauren, then at the card, and something like respect moved across his face. Heather blinked. That does not mean anything. Captain Walker turned to her slowly. It means quite a lot. Brian's mouth had gone dry. He knew the name. Anyone who handled airline operations knew the name. Whitaker Aviation Group leased aircraft, financed fleet upgrades, and serviced several major carriers. Their contracts were not background paperwork. They were lifelines. Lauren folded her hands in her lap. This aircraft, she said, is operating under a lease agreement managed by my company. Heather stared at her. The sentence did not fit inside the story she had built. Lauren continued, and your airline is currently negotiating an expanded maintenance and fleet support agreement with us. Brian closed his eyes for half a second. Captain Walker looked toward the cockpit door, then back at Lauren. Miss Whitaker, he said, I think we need to call the executive desk. Lauren's face remained calm. I think you should have verified the ticket. Captain Walker did not wait for Heather to respond. He turned toward Brian Foster and lowered his voice. Get operations on the line, now. Brian nodded once, but his hand fumbled slightly as he pulled out his phone. That small slip told the cabin more than any announcement could have. Moments ago, he had been managing a passenger issue. Now he was standing inside a corporate emergency. Heather's eyes moved from Brian to Captain Walker, then back to Lauren. The confidence was draining from her face, but pride fought to hold its place. This is being blown out of proportion, she said. I was following procedure. Lauren looked at her. No, she said. You were following an assumption. The words were quiet. They hit harder because they were true. Officer Reynolds took one step back, giving Lauren more space than he had given her before. He noticed it as he did it, and shame warmed the back of his neck. He had entered the aircraft thinking this would be simple. Crew complaint, non-compliant passenger, escort, report, done. But people were not paperwork, and a uniform did not make every story true. Miss Whitaker, he said, his voice lower now. I should have asked for the ticket first. Lauren turned to him. For a moment, her expression softened. That would have helped, she said. It was not an attack. It was a lesson that made it harder to hear. Reynolds nodded once. Yes, Mom. Mia Torres watched that exchange with her hands folded tightly in her lap. She felt her own breathing slow. There was something healing in seeing a person admit even a small piece of failure. Not enough to erase the harm, never that, but enough to remind the room that accountability could begin before punishment. Ryan Parker still had his phone up, but he was no longer narrating. His live stream had grown far beyond anything he expected. The comments were running too fast to read. Some demanded names. Some demanded firings. Some called him out for how he had framed Lauren at the beginning. He swallowed and whispered, almost to himself, I should not have said that. Eleanor Bennett heard him. She looked annoyed, then uncertain, then old in a way she had not looked before. Not old in age. Old in the tiredness of someone realizing the world she defended had made her cruel. Lauren did not look at either of them. Her attention stayed on Captain Walker. Captain, she said, I want the aircraft held at the gate until an incident report is opened. Heather snapped her head up. You cannot order that. Lauren's eyes did not move. I am requesting it as a passenger who was threatened with removal after presenting valid documentation. I am also requesting it as the executive officer of a company with an active safety and leasing relationship tied to this aircraft. Captain Walker inhaled slowly. He knew exactly what she had done. She had separated emotion from process. She had placed the incident into the language of aviation, liability, documentation, and safety culture. No shouting, no revenge, just facts lined up like stones across a river. We will open the report, he said. Heather's face tightened. Captain, this is unfair. That was the word that changed the temperature again. Unfair. Mia looked up sharply. Caleb let out a short breath. Ryan lowered his phone completely. Lauren finally turned to Heather. Unfair, she repeated. Heather's lips trembled, but she pushed on. You know what I mean. I had to make a judgment call. We make them every day. Passengers lie. People sneak into seats. We are responsible for safety. Lauren nodded once, slowly. You are responsible for safety, she said. You are also responsible for dignity. Heather blinked. Lauren's voice slowed, not to weaken, but to make sure every person heard her. You did not ask me for help. You did not check the system before accusing me. You did not treat me like a customer. You treated me like a problem that happened to be sitting in leather. A thick silence followed. Outside, a ground worker in an orange vest walked past the window, unaware that inside, a woman was saying what many people had spent their lives swallowing. Lauren continued. And when others joined you, you accepted it. When someone recorded me, you let it grow. When passengers insulted me, you did not correct them. You protected your authority, not my humanity. Heather looked down for the first time. Not long, but long enough. Brian held the phone to his ear near the galley. Yes, this is Brian Foster at Gate 12. I need executive operations. Priority escalation. It involves Whitaker Aviation Group. His voice lowered. Yes, that Whitaker. The change on his face was immediate. He turned slightly away, but everyone saw the blood leave his cheeks. Captain Walker stepped closer to Lauren, careful now not to crowd her. Ms. Whitaker, executive operations is being connected. I want to personally apologize for the way this has been handled. Lauren looked at him for a beat. I appreciate that, she said, but an apology is not the end of a process. It is the beginning of one. Walker nodded. He understood leadership well enough to know the difference between regret and repair. Heather crossed her arms, then uncrossed them. Her hands had nowhere to go. The cabin that once felt like her territory now felt full of witnesses. Caleb leaned across the aisle slightly. Ms. Whitaker? Lauren turned. I am sorry I did not speak sooner, he said. His voice was rough, honest. Lauren studied him. You spoke when it mattered. He shook his head. Could have mattered earlier. That quiet admission settled over the cabin like a prayer. Mia's eyes grew wet, though she blinked it back. She understood that kind of regret, the human kind, the kind that did not ask to be praised for doing the minimum. Lauren gave Caleb a small nod. Then Eleanor Bennett spoke. Her voice was smaller now. I said things I should not have said. No one looked at her kindly. Not yet. She took that in. I was wrong, she added. Lauren turned toward her. For the first time, Eleanor seemed to truly see the woman in seat 2A. Not the seat, not the cabin, not the assumptions. The person. Lawrence's face remained composed. Then remember how quickly you were willing to be certain, she said. Eleanor lowered her eyes. Ryan slowly raised his phone again, but this time he turned the camera toward himself. His voice shook. I started this live stream thinking I was showing a passenger acting entitled. I was wrong. I helped make this worse. What you are seeing now is not drama. It is what happens when people assume first and think later. Heather stared at him in disbelief. Lauren did not smile, but something in the room shifted 1 inch toward decency. Brian returned from the galley, phone pressed against his chest. Ms. Whitaker, he said, his voice careful, the executive office would like to speak with you directly. Lauren looked at the phone, then at Heather, then at Captain Walker. No, she said. Brian froze. Lauren picked up her own phone from the tray table. My legal counsel will speak with them first. I will not have this turned into a quiet apology call while the people in this cabin pretend nothing happened. Captain Walker said nothing. There was nothing to say. Lauren unlocked her phone and tapped one contact. The cabin listened to the faint ringing. Once, twice. Then a voice answered. Lauren, we are ready. Lauren looked straight ahead. Open the file, she said. Full incident review. Passenger treatment. Security response. Contract exposure. Preserve everything. Heather's breath caught. Lauren's voice did not rise. And notify the board liaison that this is no longer a customer service complaint. She paused. Her eyes moved across the cabin, not accusing everyone, but including everyone. This is a culture problem. The cabin did not move after Lauren said those words. This is a culture problem. The sentence stayed in the air like smoke after a fire. Heather Collins stood near the aisle with her hands clasped so tightly, her knuckles turned white. For the first time, she did not look angry. She looked cornered. And beneath that, somewhere deeper, She looked afraid of the truth she had helped create. Captain Walker stepped aside and spoke quietly into the cockpit phone. His voice was controlled, but his shoulders had stiffened. "Dispatch, this is Walker. We are holding at the gate. Passenger incident under executive review. No pushback until further notice." A faint voice answered through the receiver. Walker listened. Then he said, "Yes, I understand the delay. No, this is not routine." He looked at Lauren when he said it. Brian Foster stood beside the galley, phone in hand, eyes moving across the cabin like he was counting every possible consequence. Videos, witnesses, crew statements, a confirmed ticket. A major aviation partner in seat 2A, he had handled angry passengers before. He had handled weather delays, mechanical issues, misconnections, even medical emergencies. But this was different. This was not a problem that could be moved off the aircraft. This problem had witnesses and a name and contracts and history. Lauren remained seated, but the entire balance of the cabin had shifted around her. Earlier, people had watched her as if she were on trial. Now they watched Heather. They watched Brian. They watched Captain Walker. They watched themselves. Mia Torres looked down at her hands. They were still trembling. She rubbed her thumb against her palm and tried to slow her breathing. She had spoken up, but part of her still felt the old fear. The fear of being labeled difficult, dramatic, too sensitive. It had followed her through workplaces and waiting rooms and customer counters since she was a teenager. Lauren's courage had not looked loud. That was what stayed with Mia. It had looked like stillness, like knowing your worth even while others tried to vote on it. Officer Reynolds stepped closer to Brian. "Do you need security to remain on board?" Brian opened his mouth, then closed it. Captain Walker answered instead, "No, not unless Ms. Whitaker requests it." The words were deliberate. "Ms. Whitaker requests it." Not the crew, not Heather. Lauren looked at Reynolds. "You may stay by the front if required by airport protocol, but I do not want anyone standing over me." Reynolds nodded. Understood. He moved back immediately. Heather watched him do it, and her face tightened. She had relied on security to validate her version. Now, even security was careful around the woman she had tried to remove. Ryan Parker whispered something into his phone again, but this time his voice was low and stripped of performance. "I am still recording," he said, "because people need to see the correction too, not just the accusation." Caleb Morganton turned toward him. "Make sure you say that loud enough." Ryan looked at him. Caleb's stare was steady, not hostile, just firm. Ryan swallowed, then raised his voice slightly. "I accused her before I knew the facts," Ryan said to his viewers. "I need to say that clearly. I was wrong." Heather snapped. "Will someone please tell him to stop filming?" Lauren looked at Captain Walker. "Is there a policy against passengers recording in a cabin during a customer service dispute?" Walker hesitated. "Not in the way people think. We can ask passengers to stop if filming interferes with safety or operations." "Is he interfering with safety?" Walker looked at Ryan. Ryan was seated. His seatbelt was fastened. His phone was in his hand. "No," Walker said. Heather's mouth tightened. Lauren turned to Ryan. "Then if you continue recording, record the full truth. Do not turn another person's pain into entertainment." Ryan looked down. "Yes, Mom." That answer came out before pride could stop it. Eleanor Bennett sat very still across the aisle. Her husband had not spoken in several minutes. He had one hand over hers now, but she did not seem comforted. She seemed exposed. She looked at Lauren, then away, then back again. "My grandson is about your age," Eleanor said suddenly. The cabin turned slightly toward her. Lauren did not respond. Eleanor swallowed. "He married a black woman last year. Lovely girl, very educated, very kind." Mia closed her eyes for half a second. She knew what was coming. The strange defense people built when guilt arrived. The need to prove they were not the kind of person their actions had just revealed. Lauren's voice was calm. "Mrs. Bennett, this is not about whether you know a black person." Eleanor flinched. Lauren continued, not cruelly but with precision. "It is about what you assumed when you thought there would be no cost." Eleanor's eyes filled. She looked down into her lap. Her husband whispered, "Ellie, just listen." For once she did. Brian's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then walked toward Captain Walker. "Executive Operations wants a written statement from crew before we reopen boarding status," he said quietly. Captain Walker's eyes moved toward Heather. Then we will write it. Heather's head lifted. Captain, I need union representation before I make any statement. Brian blinked. Walker nodded. That is your right. Lauren watched the exchange. She did not smile. She did not celebrate Heather's fear. That mattered. Revenge would have been easy now. But Lauren had never built anything lasting from revenge. She believed consequences were necessary. She also believed humiliation was not justice, even when the person being humbled had humiliated first. Captain, Lauren said, I am not asking for her to be destroyed in front of passengers. Heather looked at her, startled. Lauren's gaze stayed steady, but I am asking that she not continue serving this flight. Heather's face went pale. Brian lowered his eyes. Captain Walker exhaled once. That is reasonable. Heather whispered, You cannot be serious. Walker turned to her, and this time his expression carried the full weight of command. Miss Collins, you will step off the aircraft with Mr. Foster. You will be placed off duty pending review. The words were clean, professional, final. Heather stood frozen. The cabin did not applaud. No one cheered. That would have made it smaller than it was. Instead, a deep silence settled over everyone, a silence filled with recognition. A woman's job, reputation, and future had not been taken by Lauren. They had been placed under review by Heather's own choices. Heather's eyes filled with angry tears. I was trying to protect the cabin. Lauren's voice softened, and somehow that made the moment sharper. From what? Heather looked at her. No answer came, because the honest answer had nothing to do with safety. Brian stepped beside Heather. Come with me. She looked around the cabin one last time, at Ryan's phone, at Mia's wet eyes, at Caleb's folded arms, at Eleanor's bowed head, at Officer Reynolds, who would not meet her gaze. Then she walked toward the aircraft door. Her shoes made small, clipped sounds on the floor. Each step seemed louder than the last. When she passed Lauren, she slowed. For a second, it looked like she might speak, maybe apologize, maybe defend herself again. But her pride rose first. She said nothing. Lauren let her pass. That restraint was its own kind of power. Once Heather stepped onto the jet bridge, the cabin exhaled. Not all at once, in pieces. A breath from row 1, a cough from row 3, a quiet sniff from Eleanor. The sound of people returning to their bodies after watching something they could not unsee. Captain Walker faced the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, we are going to take a few minutes to reset the cabin crew and complete required documentation. I apologize for the delay. He paused. Then he added, I also apologize for what you witnessed. That was not required. But it mattered. Lauren looked down at her boarding pass on the tray table. Seat 2A. Such a small piece of paper, such a large question. Who gets believed? Who gets doubted? Who has to prove they belong in spaces they already paid to enter? Mia unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped into the aisle before she could lose her nerve. Officer Reynolds shifted slightly, but Lauren raised one hand. It is all right. Mia walked to Lauren's row and stopped at a respectful distance. I just wanted to say, she began. Then her voice cracked. She cleared it. Thank you for staying calm. I know that should not be your job, but the way you handled it, it helped me. Lauren's face changed then, not much, but enough. The steel softened. I was not calm because it did not hurt, Lauren said. I was calm because I've learned not to hand my pain to people who might misuse it. Mia nodded, and this time she did not hide the tears. Caleb looked out the window. Ryan lowered his phone. Even Captain Walker turned away for a moment, giving the words their space. Lauren picked up her boarding pass and slipped it back into her tote. The reveal had happened. The removal had happened. But the real reckoning had only begun. The replacement flight attendant arrived with a folded jacket over one arm and a face that showed she already knew enough to be careful. Her name tag read, Angela Reed. She was in her early 50s, with silver threaded through her dark hair and the steady hands of someone who had served thousands of passengers through turbulence, grief, fear, and celebration. She paused at the front of the cabin, took in the scene, and did not pretend nothing had happened. That was the first thing Lauren noticed. Angela did not rush to smile it away. She walked to seat 2A and stopped at a respectful distance. Ms. Whitaker, she said, voice low, my name is Angela. I will be taking over service in first class. Before we continue, I want to ask if you need water, a moment, or anything else. The question was simple. It almost broke the room. because it was the first time anyone in uniform had asked Lauren what she needed. Lauren looked up at her. Water would be appreciated. Of course. Angela turned to leave, then stopped. Her eyes moved to the rest of the cabin. And for everyone else, she said, we will resume service after the captain completes the required review. Until then, please remain seated and allow people their privacy. The word privacy landed directly on Ryan Parker. He lowered his phone a little more. Angela returned with a glass of water, not a plastic cup, not an afterthought. A real glass placed carefully on a small napkin. Lauren noticed the detail. So did several others. Thank you, Lauren said. Angela gave one small nod. You are welcome. No overdone apology. No performance. Just respect. Sometimes respect was not dramatic. Sometimes it was a glass of water offered without suspicion. Captain Walker stood near the cockpit door, speaking with dispatch. Brian Foster had stepped onto the jet bridge with Heather, but his shadow still seemed to hang inside the cabin. Officer Reynolds remained near the entrance, hands folded, facing the aisle rather than Lauren. Mia had returned to her seat, but she kept her eyes forward. Her heart still had not settled. She kept hearing Lauren's words. I was calm because I have learned not to hand my pain to people who might misuse it. Mia had spent years handing her pain to the wrong people. Bosses who called her emotional, friends who told her to let things go, strangers who expected forgiveness before accountability. Watching Lauren sit there, composed but not untouched, gave her a new language for strength. It was not silence, it was ownership. Across the aisle, Eleanor Bennett finally opened her purse and pulled out a tissue. Her fingers trembled slightly. Her husband, Harold, watched her with a sadness that had been building for years. You should say something real, he whispered. Eleanor dabbed under one eye. I did. No, Harold said gently. You said enough to feel better, not enough to make it right. She turned to him, wounded. You think I am a bad person? Harold looked toward Lauren, then back at his wife. I think good people can do bad harm when they refuse to examine themselves. Eleanor looked away. For once, she did not argue. In row 1, Ryan stared at his phone screen. His live stream had ended. He had stopped it with a thumb that would not stop shaking. The last comment still flashed in his mind. You made it worse. You judged her too. Show the apology. Say her name. He had spent years thinking of himself as fair, reasonable, a man who treated people based on behavior, not appearance. But the video on his phone told another story. His own voice had narrated Lauren's humiliation before he understood a thing. He stood halfway, then hesitated. Caleb Morgan looked up at him. If you are going to apologize, do it without making her take care of you. Ryan froze. That sentence hit like a hand on his chest. He nodded. Then he sat back down. Not yet. Maybe that was the first honest thing he had done. A few minutes later, Brian Foster re-entered the aircraft alone. His face looked controlled but tired. Heather was gone, not just from the cabin, from the version of events she had tried to protect. Brian walked to Captain Walker first. They exchanged a few low words. Then both men approached Lauren. The cabin tightened again. Angela stopped near the galley, watching carefully. Captain Walker spoke first. Ms. Whitaker, Ms. Collins has been removed from duty pending investigation. Mr. Foster and I will both submit written statements. Operations has instructed us to preserve all relevant records, including crew communications and boarding data. Lauren set her water down. And passenger statements? Brian nodded. We will request them from anyone willing to provide one. Mia sat straighter. Caleb did too. Ryan stared at his hands. Lauren looked at Brian. Request is not enough. Make sure the request is neutral. No language suggesting I caused the disruption. Brian swallowed. Understood. Because that is how these things get rewritten, Lauren said. One careless phrase at a time. Captain Walker's face showed the sting of recognition. He had read incident reports. He had signed some. He knew how language could polish harm until it looked like procedure. You are right, he said. Brian looked down. The report will state that the passenger presented a valid first-class boarding pass and that the initial escalation occurred before proper verification. Lauren held his gaze. Say my name. Brian blinked. Excuse me? In the report, Lauren said. Say my name. Not female passenger. Not subject. Not individual. Lauren Whitaker, seat 2A. The cabin went very still. That matters, she added. People disappear inside vague words. Officer Reynolds lowered his eyes. He knew police reports did the same thing sometimes. So security reports too. A person became an individual. A fear became a concern. An accusation became a fact if written quickly enough. Brian nodded slowly. Lauren Whitaker. Seat 2A, Lauren leaned back. For the first time, her shoulders lowered a fraction. Not relief, not yet, but enough to show she was human beneath the armor. Captain Walker glanced toward the passengers. We will begin collecting voluntary witness information before departure. Anyone who recorded the incident may be asked to preserve the footage. Ryan stood before fear could stop him. I recorded from the beginning, he said. His voice was rough. Several people turned. Ryan looked at Lauren, but he did not step closer. Caleb's warning had stayed with him. I also said things on the stream that were unfair, Ryan continued. I assumed you were in the wrong. I want that included if you need the full record. Lauren studied him. He looked smaller without performance. Preserve the original file, she said. Do not edit it. I will not. And if you post anything else, she said, do not make yourself the center of it. Ryan nodded. I understand. He did not fully, but he was beginning to. Eleanor rose slowly next, clutching her tissue. Harold touched her arm. This time, she did not brush him off. Miss Whitaker, Eleanor said, voice thin. I owe you more than a comment from my seat. Lauren turned toward her. Eleanor looked as if standing cost her something. Pride mostly. The old kind. The brittle kind. I judged you, she said, and I encouraged what happened. I did not ask a single question before deciding you were the problem. Her lips trembled. I am sorry. Lauren was quiet for a moment. The cabin waited, hungry for forgiveness, because forgiveness would make everyone feel cleaner. Lauren did not give them that comfort quickly. Thank you for saying it, she replied. Now do something with it. Eleanor nodded, tears slipping despite her effort to stop them. That was not absolution. It was an assignment. And somehow it felt more merciful. Captain Walker returned to the intercom. He lifted the handset, paused, and looked back once at Lauren. She gave no signal, no approval, no performance. He pressed the button. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Walker. We are completing documentation after an incident in the forward cabin. I want to be clear. A passenger was asked to justify her presence in a seat that was confirmed as hers. That should not have happened. We are addressing it before we depart. The cabin listened. So did the people in economy, though they had only heard fragments and rumors. Walker continued, we appreciate your patience. More importantly, we appreciate your cooperation in maintaining respect for every person on board. He released the button. No corporate polish, no hiding. Lauren looked out the window. The sky beyond the glass had darkened into deep blue. Runway lights blinked clean rows, guiding aircraft toward places they had permission to go. For a long moment, she let herself breathe. Then her phone buzzed again. A message from her counsel, executive board requesting immediate call. They want to discuss contract suspension risk. Lauren, read it once. Then a second time. Her eyes lifted toward Brian. The cabin had corrected its tone. But outside this aircraft, the larger machine was waking up. And machines, Lauren knew, never changed because they were embarrassed. They changed when someone made the cost of staying the same too high. Lauren did not answer the message right away. She turned the phone face down and looked out at the runway lights. Red, white, blue, blinking in pattern that made sense to pilots, dispatchers, mechanics, and people who trusted systems to work because they had to. But trust was not automatic. Trust was built, and in one first-class cabin it had cracked in public. Brian Foster stood a few feet away, watching her phone like it might ring loud enough to end his career. Captain Walker had returned to the cockpit for a required update. Angela Reed moved quietly through the cabin, offering water and calm in equal measure. Her voice was soft but firm. Her hands did not shake. Can I get you anything else, Ms. Whitaker? Angela asked. Lauren looked up. Not right now. Thank you. Angela nodded, then hesitated. For what it is worth, I am sorry this happened on my aircraft. Brian looked at her sharply. Angela did not correct herself. My aircraft. Not because she owned it, because she understood duty. Every crew member was entrusted with a small part of the sky. That trust included safety. It also included respect. Lauren studied her for a second. You were not the one who caused it. No, Angela said. But I work in the same uniform. That answer reached Lauren more deeply than the earlier apologies. It did not dodge responsibility. It widened it. Lauren gave her a small nod. That matters. Angela moved on, and the cabin seemed to follow her with its eyes. She had not saved anyone with the speech. She had simply shown what service should have looked like from the start. Brian cleared his throat. Ms. Whitaker. Lauren turned toward him. The executive board is requesting a call before departure. They would prefer to speak directly and resolve this in good faith. The phrase good faith sat badly in the air. Caleb Morgan's eyes narrowed from across the aisle. Mia Torres looked down, then back up. Ryan Parker, who had promised not to center himself, still listened like a man standing near the edge of a cliff he had helped build. Lauren lifted her phone and read the message again. Board requesting immediate call. She had spent years in rooms where people used soft phrases to cover hard intentions. Resolve, align, move forward, good faith. Sometimes those words meant repair. Sometimes they meant bury it before it became expensive. She looked at Brian. Do they want to resolve it or contain it? Brian did not answer. That was answer enough. Lauren stood. The movement was quiet, but every head turned. She was not tall in a dramatic way. She was not trying to be imposing. But there was weight in the way she rose from seat 2A, like a person stepping into the exact size of herself. Officer Reynolds straightened near the door. Lauren looked at him. I am not leaving the aircraft. Yes, Mom, he said quickly. She turned to the cabin. I need to make a call. I will keep my voice low, but I will not step into a corner to make other people comfortable. No one objected. Not one person. Lauren tapped her phone and brought it to her ear. The call connected in seconds. This is Lauren. A man's voice came through, polished and tense. Ms. Whitaker, this is Thomas Hale, interim chair of the carrier board. First, let me say how deeply sorry we are for the experience you had today. Lauren looked toward the front galley, where Brian stood still as stone. Mr. Hale, she said, what experience are you referring to? A pause. I am referring to the unfortunate misunderstanding in the cabin. Lauren's eyes sharpened. There it was. Misunderstanding. A word designed to sound harmless. No, Lauren said. The cabin heard only her side, but the force of that one word was enough. No? Thomas asked. This was not a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding is when two people lack the same information. Your employee had the information. She ignored it. Then your ground response accepted her version before reviewing mine. Then your operations manager suggested I move from the seat that had already been verified as mine. Silence pressed through the phone. Lauren continued. So let us not begin with a false word. Mia's hand moved to her chest. Caleb lowered his chin, listening. Ryan stared at the floor. Thomas cleared his throat. I understand. We are still gathering facts. Good, Lauren said. Gather all of them. Preserve the boarding records, headset communications, internal messages, security call logs, and any crew notes created before and after Ms. Collins was removed from duty. Another pause. This one longer. Thomas's voice returned, more cautious. Our legal department will, of course, handle preservation. I know, Lauren said. My legal department has already sent a formal notice. Brian closed his eyes. There it was. Not a threat. A step, clean, legal, documented. Thomas exhaled through his nose. It was faint, but Lauren heard it. He was recalculating. Ms. Whitaker, we value the relationship with Whitaker Aviation Group very highly. Lauren looked out the window again. A plane lifted in the distance, rising into the evening, like nothing on earth could hold it back. Then value the people who sit in your seats, she said. The words slowed the room. Even Angela, standing near the galley, stopped moving. Thomas did not speak. Lauren let the silence do its work. Then she continued, softer now. You lease aircraft, you buy systems, you train staff, you print policies. But the real measure of an airline is what happens when an employee has power over a passenger and no executive is watching. Her voice lowered. Today, I was watching. A sound moved through the cabin, not a gasp, more like breath being held too long. Thomas said, what are you requesting? Lauren's answer came without hesitation. An independent review of this incident. A written apology that does not use the word misunderstanding. Immediate retraining for crew and ground security on passenger verification, bias recognition, and de-escalation. A review of prior complaints involving premium cabin discrimination. and a passenger dignity protocol that makes it clear no one is to be publicly accused before documentation is verified. Brian looked up. That was not revenge. It was reform. Lauren was not asking for a gift card. She was asking for a system to stop harming people when no CEO happened to be in the seat. Thomas was quiet long enough that the cabin seemed to hear his thinking. That is a significant request, he said. Lauren's face did not change. So was what happened. The sentence was clean, final. Thomas tried another angle. We can commit to an internal review immediately. Independent, Lauren said. Miss Whitaker. Independent, she repeated. Short, sharp, no room. Captain Walker reappeared at the cockpit door just as she said it. He stopped, reading the cabin at once. He saw Brian's face, Angela's stillness, Reynolds near the door. The passengers listening not with excitement now, but with something close to reverence. They were watching accountability happen in real time, and it did not look like shouting. It looked like a woman refusing to let power hide behind polite language. Thomas finally spoke. I will bring that to the board. No, Lauren said. You will recommend it to the board. A beat. Yes, he said. I will recommend it. Lauren nodded once, though he could not see her. And Mr. Hale, yes? Do not call this a delay caused by a difficult passenger. Brian's head dropped. Lauren's voice turned colder, because if that appears anywhere, in any system, internal or public, we will be having a very different conversation. Thomas answered quickly. Understood. Lauren ended the call. For a moment, she stayed standing with the phone in her hand. The cabin was silent, the kind of silence that follows a verdict, but also a lesson. Then Lauren sat back down in seat 2A, her seat, not because she owned planes, not because she had lawyers, because it had been hers from the beginning. For several seconds after Lauren sat down, nobody spoke. The plane still had not moved. The engines were quiet. The cabin air whispered through narrow vents. Somewhere in economy, a child asked his mother why they were still waiting, and his voice floated forward like a reminder that this incident had spread beyond first class. People who had not seen the beginning were already living with the consequences. That was how injustice worked sometimes. It started in one small place. Then everyone had to breathe the air it changed. Captain Walker returned to the intercom, but he did not speak immediately. He looked toward Lauren first, not for permission, but with the respect of a man who now understood that words mattered. Then he lifted the handset. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Walker again. We are completing the final steps required before departure. I want to thank you for your patience. I also want to be clear that the delay was caused by an internal handling issue, not by any passenger refusing a valid request. In row 1, Ryan looked down. That sentence corrected more than the cabin record. It corrected him. Captain Walker continued. We will be underway shortly. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. He hung up. The announcement settled over the aircraft like clean water over smoke. Brian Foster stood near the galley typing into his tablet. His fingers moved slowly now, carefully. No vague language, no polished lie. He wrote what had happened in plain words. Lauren Whitaker, seat 2A, valid boarding pass. Escalation before full verification. Public accusations. Security called. Each phrase felt heavier than the last. He had written hundreds of reports in his career. Mechanical delays, medical assistance, passenger arguments, missing catering. But this one made him feel the moral weight of paperwork. He realized how easily a life could be bent by the person holding the pen. Angela Reed came through the aisle with warm towels, but she did not pretend service could erase harm. She placed one gently beside Lauren. Whenever you are ready, Angela said. Lauren looked at the towel, then at her. Thank you, Angela. The use of her name stopped Angela for a heartbeat, not because passengers never used names. Some did, but Lauren said it like it belonged to a person, not a name tag. Angela gave a small smile. You are welcome, Lauren. The cabin heard it. Not Ms. Whitaker, Lauren, not in disrespect, in recognition. Mia Torres watched that exchange and breathed through a tightness in her chest. She had spent much of her adult life shrinking herself in places where she thought being polite meant being quiet. But Lauren had shown her something different. Politeness did not require disappearance. Calm did not mean surrender. Grace did not mean accepting harm without naming it. Mia opened her phone and typed a message to her mother. You always told me to speak when something feels wrong. I did today. She stared at the message for a moment, then pressed send. A reply came less than a minute later. I am proud of you. Mia looked out the window so no one would see her cry. Across the aisle, Caleb Morgan folded his hands over his stomach and stared straight ahead. He had spoken up, but his mind kept replaying the moment before he did. The pause, the hesitation, the calculation all decent people hate admitting they make. Is it my business? Will it make things worse? What if I am wrong? He had waited. He wished he had not. Lauren turned toward him as if she could feel the weight of his thoughts. Mr. Morgan. He looked over. Yes, Mom. You helped change the room. He gave a tired smile. Took me too long. Lauren studied him. Most people never move at all. He nodded once, but the forgiveness in her words did not absolve him. It asked him to be quicker next time. He understood. In row 1, Ryan finally stood again, this time slowly. He kept both hands visible, his phone off, screen black. Miss Whitaker, he said. Lauren looked at him. The whole cabin seemed to tense, waiting to see whether this would become another performance. Ryan swallowed. I am not asking you to make me feel better. I just want to say I am sorry. I recorded you like you were a spectacle. I spoke before I knew anything. That was wrong. Lauren did not rush to answer. Ryan stood there in the silence he had earned. Finally, she said, What will you do with the video? I will preserve it, he said, the original. I will send it to whoever your legal team asked me to send it to. And I will post a correction, not an excuse. Lauren nodded, then do that. Ryan sat down, face red but steadier than before. A few rows back, Eleanor Bennett held her husband's hand with both of hers. Her apology had not fixed anything, but it had opened a door she had kept locked for years. She looked at Lauren and saw not an argument, not a symbol, not a headline, a woman. A woman who had been forced to carry herself with unbearable discipline because others had failed to carry basic decency. Eleanor leaned toward Harold. I am going to call Claire when we land. Her husband looked at her. Your daughter-in-law? Eleanor nodded, tears gathering again. I think I have some listening to do. Harold squeezed her hand. That would be a start. At the front, Officer Reynolds removed his small notebook and wrote something that was not required for the report. Ask first. Verify first. Do not inherit another person's bias. He stared at the words. Then he underlined them. Captain Walker stepped out once more and spoke softly to Lauren. We are cleared to depart if you are comfortable continuing on this flight. Lauren looked at the aisle where Heather had stood, then at Angela, then at Mia, Caleb, Ryan, Eleanor, Reynolds, Brian, and the silent rows behind them. She understood the question beneath the question. Are you willing to remain inside the place where you were harmed? That was never simple. Healing did not happen because someone apologized. Trust did not return because the schedule needed it to. But sometimes staying was not surrender. Sometimes staying was a statement. Lauren picked up her water and took one slow sip. Yes, she said, I will continue. Captain Walker nodded, thank you. Lauren's voice stayed calm. Do not thank me for staying. Make sure the next person does not have to be this strong. Walker absorbed that like an order. Yes, Mom. A few minutes later, the aircraft finally pushed back from the gate. The motion was smooth, almost gentle. The runway lights slid past the windows in long glowing lines. The cabin was quiet, but not the same quiet as before. This quiet was awake. As the plane turned toward the runway, Lauren rested her head against the seat and closed her eyes. Only then, hidden from the room by the angle of the window and the dimming cabin lights, did her face soften. Not break, soften. She let herself feel the hurt for one private breath. Then another. Then the engines rose. The plane gathered speed, and Seat 2A moved forward with everyone else. The aircraft lifted into the darkening sky, and for a while, no one spoke above a whisper. The engines carried them west, steady and deep, while the cabin lights dimmed to a soft gold. Trace clicked. Seats belts shifted. A cup of ice settled with a faint crackle. Life on the plane began again, but it did not return to what it had been. Something had changed, not in the aircraft, in the people. Lauren Whitaker sat in Seat 2A with her eyes open now, watching the reflection of the cabin in the window. She could see Angela Reed moving through the aisle with practiced care. She could see Captain Walker's shadow near the cockpit door when he stepped out to check the cabin. She could see Ryan Parker sit still, his phone face down for once, both hands folded, like a man waiting for judgment. But Lauren was not interested in judgment. Judgment had filled the cabin too quickly already. What she wanted was repair. Her phone buzzed just after the seatbelt sign went off. A message from her legal counsel appeared on the screen. Board accepted independent review. Written commitments pending. Contract expansion placed on hold until compliance plan is received. Lauren read it once, then again. She did not smile. Holding a company accountable was not victory. Not yet. A press statement could be written in minutes. A training memo could be drafted in an afternoon. Culture took longer. Culture lived in glances, shortcuts, jokes, assumptions, and the quiet decisions people made when no camera was pointed at them. She typed back, require timeline, require public accountability, include passenger dignity protocol. Then she locked the phone. Angela approached with the meal tray, but she stopped before lowering it. Miss Whitaker, she said, I checked the special meal list myself. Your order is correct. I also made sure nothing was changed after boarding. Lauren looked up. That small detail touched a place anger had not reached. Thank you for checking, she said. Angela's expression softened. People should not have to be grateful for being treated properly. Lauren held her gaze. No, but I still appreciate it. Angela placed the tray gently. Real silverware, warm bread, a folded cloth napkin, water refill without being requested, ordinary first-class service, the kind that had been available all along. Across the aisle, Eleanor Bennett watched the exchange. Shame moved through her slowly now, no longer sharp and defensive, but heavy and useful. She opened the notes app on her phone and began typing. Claire, I want to apologize for times I may have made you feel like you had to prove yourself in our family. I did not understand enough. I am ready to listen. She stared at the message for a long time. Then she sent it. Her husband saw her thumb move and reached for her hand. No speech. Just contact. Behind them, Mia Torres received another text from her mother. Speaking up is hard. Keep doing it anyway. Mia smiled through tears. She finally stopped hiding. She looked toward Lauren but did not interrupt her. Some gratitude was better carried quietly. Ryan Parker waited until the cabin settled, then opened his phone. He did not go live. He did not add music. He did not edit himself into the hero. He recorded a short statement with the overhead light shining plainly on his face. My name is Ryan Parker, he said. Earlier tonight, I recorded a woman in first class and described her as if she were doing something wrong. I did not know the facts. I judged too fast. The woman, Lauren Whitaker, had every right to be in her seat. The failure was not hers. It was ours, mine included. He stopped. His thumb hovered over the screen. Then he posted it, not because it erased anything, because correction had to be as public as harm. Near the front, Officer Reynolds sat in the jump seat for a few minutes before returning to the terminal after clearance from the captain. Before leaving, he asked Angela for a blank incident card. On the back, he wrote a note and handed it to Lauren. She read it after he stepped off. Miss Whitaker, I should have verified first and assumed less. I will carry that lesson into every call after tonight. Officer Mark Reynolds. Lauren folded the card once and placed it in her bag. That mattered too, not as forgiveness, as evidence that people could still choose to learn. The flight continued. Somewhere over Missouri, Captain Walker came through the cabin. He stopped beside Lauren, careful not to loom. I received confirmation from operations, he said. The report has been filed under your name. Lauren Whitaker, Seat 2A. The wording reflects that your boarding pass was valid. Lauren nodded. Thank you. He hesitated. I have been flying for more than 30 years. I thought I knew how quickly a situation could go wrong. Tonight reminded me that sometimes the danger is not turbulence or weather. Sometimes it is a story we accept too quickly. Lauren looked at him for a long moment. That is a good place to start, she said. He accepted that. Not praise, not absolution. A start. When the plane finally began its descent, the cabin windows filled with the lights of Los Angeles, endless and glittering, like a city made of watchful eyes. The landing gear lowered with a deep mechanical groan. Passengers straightened, bags shifted under seats. The ordinary ritual of arrival began, but nobody in that cabin was the same person who had boarded. The wheels touched down just after dusk, a soft jolt, a rush of reverse thrust. Then applause did not come. This was not that kind of landing. Instead, there was a quiet respect as the plane slowed. People unbuckled more carefully. They stood more slowly. They gave Lauren space without being asked. As she stepped into the aisle, Caleb Morgan stood and gave her a nod. "Safe travels, Ms. Whitaker."
You too, Mr. Morgan?
Mia smiled at her through red eyes. Lauren smiled back. Eleanor did not speak this time. She simply placed one hand over her heart and bowed her head slightly. Lauren accepted the gesture with a small nod, then moved forward. At the aircraft door, Angela Reed waited. "I hope the rest of your night is peaceful," Angela said. Lauren paused. "So do I," she replied, "and I hope your airline listens to people like you." Angela's eyes shone, but her voice stayed steady. "I hope so too." Lauren stepped onto the jet bridge. The air was cooler there. Quiety. Away from the cabin lights, away from the watching faces, away from the seat that had become a battlefield over a truth that should have been simple. She belonged because she was a person. The ticket only confirmed the seat. Outside the gate, her phone buzzed again. Another message from counsel. "Media requests coming in. Board wants joint statement." Lauren looked at the screen, then slipped the phone into her pocket. There would be statements, meetings, reviews, consequences, maybe change, maybe resistance first, then change. That was how systems moved when someone pushed hard enough. But for one moment, Lauren stood still into terminal and let herself breathe. She thought of her father polishing airport floors before sunrise. She thought of her mother pressing dignity into every lesson. She thought of every person who had ever been asked to prove they belonged in a place they had already earned. Then she walked forward. Not hurried, not shaken, forward. Because dignity does not wait for mission. And respect should never depend on someone discovering your title, your money, or your power. If this story moved you, like this video so more people can hear its message. Subscribe for more stories about courage, justice, and human dignity. And comment these 3 words in English. Never stay silent.